Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Fish podcast where we compare and contrast songs and the evolution of their jamming styles throughout the band's career. My name is Ryan Storm, and today I am joined by Matt Kolinski. Matt is a Chicago native who currently resides in South Burlington, Vermont. He manages acts like Goose, the Werks, Rumpke Mountain Boys, Spiritual Res, and more. Matt has also worked with bands like Pigeons Playing Ping Pong, Spafford, Dopapod, and Turkuaz in the past. His love affair with Fish started in the mid-90s when he first heard Fast Enough for You off of the band's 1993 release Riff. The rest, as they say, is Fishery. Say hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt. How are you, Ryan?
That works. Thank you so much for being on today. Very excited to get down and talk some Fish with you. Why don't you just tell everyone, how did you get into Fish?
Well, I got into Fish, as you just mentioned, probably in the early 90s. It sounds like you corrected me. Was it 1993 that album came out?
Okay, yeah, 92 was Picture of Nectar.
Sure, right. So I kind of wrote that off the top of my head, but it was around that time. I graduated middle school in 1992. First freshman year of high school was, that 92, 93 year. And I had just gotten into playing guitar. I was really into metal, bands like Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera, stuff like that. Things were transitioning into the grunge era, like Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden. I was getting into all of that. And a lot of what me and my friends who played guitar did at the time was we oftentimes bought Guitar World magazine so that we could learn how to play those songs of those bands that we loved. And, one day there was a little baby article about Trey in there and something about, that album that had just come out. And, I kind of dug into it a little bit. And I'm a big fan of the sad song. I like, that
the ballad,
that mellow ballad kind of vibe, the Black Muddy River, Jerry vibe. And, so for obvious reasons, knowing that about me, you would understand why I was really turned on by Fast Enough for You.
That song it's such a great song.
Yeah, it's just, it really is. It's some of my favorite Tom Marshall lyrics, one of my favorite Fish songs, in 20. So that was, early 90s. I slowly, morphed from metalhead, grunge head into hippie throughout the 90s, not seeing Fish at all. Did not get to go see them.
When did you first see them?
My first show was June 30th, 1999 in Bonner Springs, Kansas. I do have an unripped ticket stub to see the band. This is back when they ripped them, but to see the band do their Halloween performance of Quadrophenia at what was known at the time as the Rosemont Horizon, and just outside of Chicago in Rosemont, Illinois. I never saw them then. I could have. There's just a number of like historical Chicago area performances that I did not see. They played Farm Aid, where they played with Willie Nelson and Neil Young together. There was the UIC Pavilion run in '98, fall of '98. The Farm Aid happened just a few weeks earlier than that in Tinley Park, Illinois, and I just did not go. I was raised with the Dead, by a couple of, kind of 9 to 5 hippies, if you will. And I just didn't really want to be part of that scene anymore. And I really tried my damnedest for a long, long time to not be part of it. But eventually, I was going to...
give in eventually.
We do. I was going to school at a local community college called College of DuPage, and I was working like as a driver at Papa John's or something, during the day. And one of the guys I worked with was like, "Yo, dude, I'm going to get my check, and we're driving 8 hours to Kansas City, basically Bonner Springs, to go see Fish." And I went with him to get my check, and we both left and drove to Kansas City, you
It
know,
just
and
happened.
that was how it happened. It was like the best experience ever.
How many shows are you at now?
You know, I don't count, but I'm going to say it's probably about 100, 120 or something
Wow,
like that.
that's awesome.
I used to do, you know, the counting shows and, you know, when was the last time I saw a song, but now I go in with no expectations because I find that it
Awesome.
just makes the experience that much better.
When was
So
the last time you saw them?
the last time that I saw the band play, well, it was sometime in 2019. It
Yeah.
wasn't the New Year's run. I don't remember exactly. It was last year, you know.
Yeah.
It's just been such a whirlwind. You know, the seeing fish for me these days is more of a treat now and again.
Mm,
It's not something that I can go on tour because I'm so focused on bands like Goose and other artists that I work with that are, you
right.
know, Goose is just so busy, even in the middle of a pandemic that, you
Which
know,
is awesome.
it's hard to
That's
focus on. It really
yeah.
is. We're very, very lucky.
Yes, for
So
sure.
so yeah, you know, that first show was just a game changer. I did continue to go, you know, on tour. Saw Alpine Valley in '99, which is one of my favorite fluff heads. And you know, I ended up seeing a number of shows in the fall. They did that holiday run that year because, you know, going into the New Year show, which was Big Cypress. You know, I think the point of the holiday tour was a couple of reasons. I think one was because it was a holiday celebration and everyone was talking about Y2K at the time and how everything, you know, at the stroke of
Yeah, the world
midnight,
was
like
gonna end.
the world was going to blow up or something. But now hearing a lot of information come from people who were part of the organization at the time, it sounds like, you know, there was talk of Big Cypress being their last show for God knows how long, you know, but it
Right.
ended
Yeah.
up going like almost another year. They ended up doing the hiatus after 10/7/2000 in Shoreline, but it sounds
Yeah.
like they could have easily just stepped away then after Big
Yeah.
Cypress as well. And maybe
Well,
that's why they were did the holiday tour to make a bunch of money. Who knows?
yeah. Well, it was a great holiday tour, and I guess you seeing a lot of shows in '99 really, puts your song pick into context, which is you picked "Split Open and Melt." Which why don't you talk a little bit about why you picked this song to talk about?
Well, you know, I could we could do a whole episode about Big Cypress. I, you know, Split Open and Melt, you know, the jams in general are some of my favorites that come out of the song. You know, often, you know, they are kind of choppy, but oftentimes you get these kind of Brian Eno-ish soundscapes that come out of them. But you'll
Yeah.
also get like that dancey, funky, you know, fish that everyone has come to know and love. But I would say that, you know, above and beyond um, the fact that I was there, really, you know, I can I can see myself where I was standing. I can smell the air when I listen to this. You know, this to a lot of fans, you know, even, you know, young and old, this is known as, you know, one of the best, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
out there for
Even to
sure.
me, who prefers 3.0.
Right, right. So you turned 20. Wow, you're right there. Like
Oh yeah.
you were a baby when
I
this
wasn't
was happening.
alive
You
actually.
you were still swimming.
I was
Okay.
born a month after 1.0 ended, so I
Oh
wasn't
my
even
goodness.
a
Okay.
thing yet.
Well, I mean, which is completely irrelevant, but it just really it puts into context, you know,
Yeah.
for me. Like so, you know, more than anything, the fact that I was there really, really, you know, makes this thing come alive every time I listen to it. But I mean, I just feel very lucky to have been there in that moment and
Absolutely.
get to
Yeah.
talk about it. Um, you know, it's fun to talk about this version, regardless of whether you were there or not. But you know, to be one of, you know, a handful of people in a speck of moment in time that to be there, it just makes it it's a completely different thing. So yeah, I mean, this was a really really fun exercise, by the way. Going back, listening to this version, it really took me back, and comparing and contrasting with the version that you had picked. So, if you want, we can certainly dig into this.
Let's do it. Yeah. What's
Let,
I mean, I had only heard the Big Cypress Melt, I think, once before.
okay.
Um, I think I listened to all of Big Cypress maybe one time with a few of the jams. Sorry, multiple times. But I really enjoyed listening to this one. It kind of, I think it really well captures the late '99 sound, as a lot of the jams from that time do. And it's really cool because it's a very different kind of vibe from the version I picked, which is December 30th, 2018, from MSG, which is one of my favorites. I think Split Open and Melt had a great kind of renaissance in 2018, after not really being taken out too much for most of 3.0. Really came back, starting with the Gorge version, which was fantastic. There was a great version in Camden, another one in Hampton, and then the Vegas and MSG versions were where it really shined again after
Right.
kind of a long time of not really been jammed out in that way. And this one, being a keyboard player myself, and I always pay special attention to Page, and this version just really is just the Page show. His synth work is absolutely crazy in this one. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Are we talking about the Big Cypress one?
The one I picked.
The one you picked, 100%. I had mentioned, previously, that Brian Eno influence that the band had, and I do think I agree and disagree with what you said regarding the versions being completely different. Outside of like the foundation of the song, there are certainly some similarities, and like I'm going to take a picture and send these notes that I took to you. It is crazy. I haven't taken notes about like dissecting songs like this in so long.
Awesome.
But like the Brian Eno thing kept coming up in my notes. And I think, when I think of Page and that synthy stuff and those layers and, Trey's loop on top of that, kind of intertwining like with what Page is doing, or vice versa, it often comes up with that Eno-esque, sound. But I definitely, had that in my notes. I thought that your version, as with a lot of 3.0 versions, I feel like the band just kind of, from time to time, just kind of stumbles through the body of the song. Trey oftentimes will miss notes. Sometimes he doesn't play at all. That was pretty relevant in the 12/30/18 version from MSG.
Yeah, there were a lot of flubs. I noticed that.
Yeah. And then when they get into the We Breathe Deep part, then they can kind of go into that exploratory territory. They can just do whatever they want. They kind of stumbled through, the song. Now they can get weird or jam or do whatever they want. And that is pretty much, I think what happened. My notes say jamming starts around the 5-minute mark. Clear from the start that they're going deep and not coming back in a good way.
Yes.
Let's see.
There's some great. It starts off with some really awesome, like hypnotic guitar swells from Trey. Like that. That's
right.
I used the word hypnotic a whole bunch of times in my notes from this because it was just really like he was playing with I think like the volume as well, so it was going like
right. He has that like whammy pedal. People called it the whale call, like back in 2009 when they came back, and he like uses that a lot, like in this version. And every time I hear him, just step on that for a jam, it just makes me think of 2009. And that not in a bad way. I think in 2009, in '09, I was kind of sick of it, but now when I hear it, I don't mind it. And what were you saying? It had been around already?
Well, I mean, he's had the whammy pedal for, you know, almost all of the band's career, but the whale
Right.
call, I think, when they first came back after the breakup, was kind of a crutch for Trey.
I agree.
And he kind of, he went to it when, he wasn't sure where to go in the jam, and it wasn't always used to great effect or well. But I think in this jam, it's used to great effect, and I think it really fits with the vibe of the thing, especially early on in the jam. Trey's whale calling over some really nice dissonant chords from Page on the Wurlitzer, and that moment stuck out to me.
Yeah, I in between that 5 and 9 minute mark, and I re-listened to this a few times because I kept noticing that I didn't have any like notation in between there, and that's a lot of time in a Fish jam, for things to happen. And I'm like, Matt, are you sure? Like, there's nothing you want to write down? But I do remember like that melodic kind of Wurlitzer, sound that Page was playing. My first like major note comes in around 9 minutes. I said around 9 minutes, lots of exploratory soundscapes. 9:15, Trey hits this funk chord / tremolo, like Brian. That's my first Brian, like
Yeah.
notation. Like if you're listening to us talk, people, you might hear, the split open and melt, like do 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 do. That's not what's happening at all right now for the record. Like not at all. Like we can do some weird sounds in the microphones and it probably would be more accurate. Then around
Yes.
9:30, I have Jam takes a left turn continues the soundscapes theme, but driving down a different road.
Yeah, I have the same timestamp as just it starts going to space. And I think one thing that really kind of changes the tone of the jam as well is there's a very subtle synth swell from Page just before the 7 minute mark. And then he switches over to the Rhodes at the 8 minute mark, which always gives, I mean, I absolutely love the Rhodes and how Page uses it. And I think it adds a certain vibe to the jam. You know, it can either, it kind of gives it a spacey or almost otherworldly quality because of the phaser on it. And I think in this jam, it just really starts to, take it out there. And, I think Trey's playing is definitely influenced, obviously, by what Page is doing. And then when he starts after the 9.5 minute mark, when he hits the Yamaha CS60, and my note says, Page hits the CS60 and begins summoning aliens, which I think is a pretty good descriptor of the sounds that are coming out.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's pretty good. I have, just around that 9:30 mark, the soundscape theme, but driving down a different road, constantly painting a picture of absolute bliss. Then around at 12 minutes, that craziness that they're jamming from like 9:30 to 12 minutes, it just continues. Then it kind of mellows out. It's very subtle, but the band's not done. And the crowd, you hear this big crowd eruption and cheering.
Oh yeah, they're eating it up. Yeah,
probably because they're eating it up. It's kind of a break in the jam. It's a little bit of a breather. Kuroda's probably doing some cool shit on the lights, and MSG, using. Have you been to MSG?
I haven't. It's
in
the bucket
your
list.
career? Okay, of course. I mean, it's got to be, the MSG, Hampton, stuff like that. Those are places you absolutely need to see Fish. So, but yeah, then around that 12-minute mark, I've got Fishman kind of has this little tribal type vibe. It's almost like his toms or almost like a conga.
It's
sound.
crazy how similar our notes are here. I have Fish is at that point playing more of like an accent role to the jam. He kind of abandoned his like ride cymbal or hi-hat and snare beat and is like, playing on the toms and
he's like
cymbals. And
he had kind of been a little bit more underlying in the jam up until this point, but because of his like high-pitched percussive instruments that he's playing at this point, I think he's more at the forefront of the jam. He's making himself more known for a little while. Trey just continues with those loops, like screaming, like melodic vibes, and shit, like crazy shit like that. And I think one thing that I want to note, because I don't have many notes in between the Trey screaming melodic part around 12 minutes and the end of the song. Trey brings us back around like 15 minutes, but I made a specific note that once the first time I listened through, and then when I look back today, I was pretty intrigued, and I actually went and listened to this. So the jamming of this sort, I remember for the first time going when I was on tour in 2004. They were doing a lot of just like thick, like synthy stuff, and the feedback. A specific note that I made on a specific song regarding this jam was the Sense and Subtle Sounds jam from August 12th, 2004 in Camden. So I went back and listened to that, and I remember I was there. I remember seeing Trey. That was obviously a very sensitive time in the band's career. It was the last real quote unquote show before Coventry happened.
Yeah.
And Camden is Philadelphia pretty much. It's like Brooklyn to Manhattan, just right across the river there. And I just remember Trey was down on one knee for half the jam, just basically like ramming his guitar into his amplifier, creating these swells and feedback, and it was like blissful, but it was like angsty, like Kurt Cobain, and he was just like letting it all out. But that aside, and the emotion of the time aside, the sound of the jam listening to a lot of that stuff, like the Mr. Completely like jam from like I think Utah that summer, or maybe that was '03, but like
That was '03, yeah.
that 2.0 sound, there was like a lot going on here, and you could
Yeah, and I
even
think I agree with drawing the parallel between the two, but I think that kind of jamming has more direction and feel to it than it did back then. Like, at least to my ears,
right
this one feels like,
totally
they're going into space and they're all kind of together in this. In 2004, it just sounded more aimless and, Trey not really listening to what the other three guys were doing. And as you said, like ramming his guitar into his amp and just creating noise. And obviously that's a byproduct of his, his obviously his state of mind and
sure.
how he's not on Oxy now. But yeah, and I thought it sounded kind of like a 1999 jam
There
in
is definitely that
towards the
too.
end.
It was
And
like the
I listened to
Saket
this
disc or
one.
something, you know.
Yeah, and I listened to this one before the Cypress one, and I expected the Cypress one to be a lot more similar than it actually was. And it was really cool listening to how, instead of going into deep space, to my ears, the Cypress one stays mostly type 1 for the first 10 minutes or so, and then kind of moves into this really happy and uplifting jam in space, which I really liked. Kind of went in the opposite direction that I was expecting it to. It was really cool. It actually, yeah, towards the end of the Cypress one, it reminded me of the 12.795 mics. Just kind of the the jam they were playing, like that happy melodic. It sounded like they were about to go into Weekapog.
Right. I mean, we didn't really. I've got a whole other page of notes for the Big Cypress split open and mount. We can certainly get into that, because that that part that you mentioned, that kind of happy melodic, like the end of the jam, that goes into Catapult. Spoiler alert. But that's really what ties it all together and really, makes the whole jam. And I hope when you listen to it, I know you're listening to it, you're only listening to it for the second time. I'm assuming you were listening to it on re-listen.
Yeah.
net, and the way that it's chopped up, it would show it would be shown as Split Open and Melt and Catapult as separate tracks, and they are not. It is Catapult sung over basically the end of the jam and Split Open and Melt, which
Okay.
never finishes either. So yeah, I would if
Yeah,
you
because to my ears, it was kind of an unfortunate ripcord. Like I was ready for that jam to keep going and going.
it really I completely disagree. It was basically, which oftentimes happens, like when something is tagged as Catapult, it's tagged as Catapult because they sang Catapult, or
Right.
just spoke the words, like spoken word style, over a jam. But it's kind of a mashup of sorts. It's still Split Open and Melt, in my opinion. They do that with Kung as well. Like sometimes it's not like on its own anywhere. Like one of my favorite drowns ever from Charlotte in 2003, like they're doing like this Black Sabbath jam and they sing Kung over it. I would say that that's still drowned, with Kung in the middle of it. This I would probably, that's how I look at it. I never really looked at it the way you did, where they
Well,
just
now
played the
I'm gonna go
ripcord.
back and now after we record, I'm
I
gonna go back and listen
I
to that
would
Catapult.
definitely encourage you to do that. I think that you'll understand, where I'm coming from, because in my opinion, that jam and then them singing Catapult over it is what makes this what some consider the best, or one of the best Split Open and Melts of all time.
Yeah, so I want to get into this one more. I want to hear, to your ears, what you love so much about this one, because to me, it didn't, as much as I loved it, my version to my ears sounds like it's a lot more, exploratory. Like there's a lot more going on to my ears, and it was kind of the opposite of you. You didn't have that many notes for my version, and I had like twice the amount of notes for my version that I did for yours.
I mean, I
So I think it
had a
was interesting.
page. I had a page for 12/30/18. You know, so I just didn't want to take like 2 hours talking about the version, which I could do, just
Oh
with
yeah,
just about any good fish jam. But so for mine, basically it starts the band getting into the jam around. I've got at 4:39, and I'm listening to all of this stuff on re-listen. Some of the
yeah.
stuff
I
is
I did this on
official
re-listen
live
as well.
releases, but just because everything is there in one place, it's easier for the sake of the conversation to have
Yeah.
those types of timestamps here. So I have at 4:39, the band goes into the jam. I've got a little sub note that says, when going into a Split It Open and Melt jam, I think of the yes and quote unquote format the band has integrated into their improv, from the Second City crew in Chicago. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of like what is happening here. And honestly, I listened to like 7 different like killer versions of Split Open and Melt today, like 8, 10,
Awesome.
97, 8, 16, 93 from St. Louis. It's they're completely different entities, but they're
Oh
still
yeah.
fantastic versions, right? So that's something that that with Split Open and Melt, I think when they start the jam, it more than almost any jam vehicle in the Fish catalog, they use that yes and method. Like you hear someone doing something, and then you hear someone subtly following it, and maybe it catches on and maybe it doesn't. So I'm hearing this for probably the first couple of minutes, which is pretty much par for the course for the late 90s in a Split Open and Melt jam, where they're kind of like doing something, someone's following someone else. Oftentimes in 99, Mike was leading jams with his just phenomenal bass playing that year.
Yeah.
Like the again, what we know now, what was going on in the band's career at the time, Mike was definitely the glue holding things together, I think.
For
I
sure,
think
and you
there's a
can
lot
see
of
with
people.
the stage position shift in '99 as well, putting Fishman and Mike in the middle, as well as showcasing the kind of divide between Trey and Page that was happening at the time.
Right.
You can see Fishman and Mike were kind of the core of really, like, they were really at the forefront of the jamming at that time.
Right.
So that's pretty significant.
Ironically, my first show, 6:30 '99, was the first show that they
The
had
debut
that
of that
stage plot.
lineup.
That was the
Yeah.
very first one. It was, even for a guy who hadn't been to a show, I knew enough about the band at the time. I was, you know, as much engulfed in the band as you are at your age, like, which was, I was your age at this time pretty
Mm-hmm.
much. And, just knee deep in the thick of it and wanted to know everything about the band. So when I showed up, I was kind of confused as to what was going on there. But, I have, just getting back into the 12:30 '99 version, I have around 6:20, band starts to loosen up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Trey starts looping this melodic
This
feedback,
big
but
sustain loop I heard at 6.5.
yeah, that sounds about right. It's not like that whammy loop that he's known for. It's that
Those
kind
were
of,
actually I heard them kind of poking in really like right at the beginning of the jam. They were pretty quiet and pretty subtle, but I could hear the kind of, I don't
yeah.
know if they were the keyboard loops or just his regular guitar loops, but I could hear them
I could
in the
hear it
background.
too, but I think like that sustained, like more even like feedback is like what both of us are hearing here. But I think
Yeah,
it's probably when we hear those like quick little blips, it's probably, how he's just basically dancing all over those pedals for a couple of
yeah,
minutes, trying to figure out like that sound that he wants for the jam, coupled with his, I crazy ADD that he's probably trying to figure out what's going on up there. But eventually, I have at 7:57, Trey plays a lick that I will never forget. If this was on, I think it's on Fishnet, where they play like a little clip. It's like a little 5-second clip. Like, what was this? Like a mystery clip or something like that,
oh, Mystery Jam
or
Monday, yeah.
Fantasy Tour. It's one of those websites. Right. So he plays this little lick that's like do 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 do. It's or something like that. And then Mike follows it. It's like that yes and kind of thing. And it just happens for a second, and then it's still there. Like the concept is still there, but you know that riff is gone. But that's just one of those riffs. Like I'll never forget. I remember exactly where I was. I was watching people. I was right next to Kuroda. They were in this big tent, and there was this big school bus made out of Uno cards that was being passed around the top of the audience towards the front of the stage. And it was made by this guy who called himself Uno. I actually, ironically, I ended up moving to Philadelphia in 2004. I met this guy who's now my friend. His name's Clay. But I was like, "You're the guy with the Uno bus." But that's why I remember this moment. I remember that riff right then, and this school bus made of Uno cards. It's just little moments like that. So yeah, that was happening at that time. The whole band was basically like dancing between each other's playing. A lot of that yes and concept, was happening where someone was catching on to one person's riff. Um, Trey played that little riff. Mike immediately piggybacked it, and then Fishman's drums kind of piggyback that, and then Page just kind of fills in the sound. That all kind of happens for, I mean, that's in between like the 8 and 11 minute mark. Um,
Yeah,
and then I have like around 11 minutes that things just kind of change completely, or at least semi completely, into more of those like spacey melodic soundscapes that I keep mentioning. It's there's almost like 4 parts to this song. There's the
Yeah.
foundation of the song that we know, and then there's like 3 jams. There's the jam in the beginning where they're trying to figure it out. There's the one that I was just talking about, basically from like 6:20 to like 9:30 or something, or maybe like 10:30. I don't know. I've got like, this is where my notes kind of become a little unclear because I kept hearing different things every time I was listening to it. So, but
It
at the
happens.
11-minute mark, I have changes direction into spacey melodic soundscapes, upbeat, dancey, awkwardly funky vibe. And
Love it.
um it's this freaking Mike. It's Mike, dude. Mike starts to play that like crazy, or he's playing like some like cool stuff, for a while. Um, but
And I think on the audience tape of my version, you can't hear Mike as well. And I'm sure if I listened to the soundboard copy, I would have noticed him probably a lot more. But I was trying to go on an even playing field here. And since there's no official release of Cypress, I listened to the re-listen version of
sure.
mine just because I know I would definitely have some bias to the one with the better sound quality.
Hmm.
But I do think both of these jams do have these really unique and interesting soundscapes, and I think again, total opposite ends of the spectrum. My version is kind of jagged and outer space jams, and yours is kind of it's again melodic and uplifting and
Hmm.
very different, and it's kind of the reverse of what you'd expect from the years that they're from. Because 2018, isn't as known for its evil and spacey jams as 99 is.
Right, right. I mean, I think that there's different points in times for that, for sure. I think this jam. I've had the conversation about this jam before with people, and some people don't like it at all. Some people tell me that they feel like the band sounds confused or something because there's like spacey stuff, but like Fishman, like right around that 11-minute mark I was talking about, like Fishman starts going into this kind of like bossa nova, like Yamar kind of like vibe, like
Mm-hmm.
on his drums, but like there's still like this swelly synthy, like Trey and Page like weirdness going on, which was par for the course at that time.
I heard hints of Thread and Seven Below from Fishman. Obviously, neither of those songs existed at the time, but that's kind of what his beat was reminding me of a little bit
Sure.
around that time.
Sure. Yeah. So I had goes into a bossa nova question mark. So I'm not
Mm-hmm.
super educated on what that means, but I think most people would understand type groove for the next several minutes, which by the 13.5-minute mark feels like an out of body experience, which is par for the course for any great Fish jam. Like if you have been to a Fish show, or even when you're sitting at home or you're driving in the car and you're in the middle of like just a really intense, fantastic jam, you kind of like forget that you're there for a moment. You're just so engulfed in what's going on
Yeah.
in the music. And for me, like that's happening here. And that happens for a while. They just kind of like get into this groove where they're not. It's not the best groove. It's not the worst groove, but it just feels really really great. And they don't have to add anything or take away from the jam, so they just keep doing it, and they're having fun. The audience is having fun. They're in the middle of the Everglades in Florida. Everything is right. You have to remember this is the day set of New Year's
Right.
Eve.
Yeah. It's
So
not even the big
it's
one.
it's light outside when this is happening. There's not like crazy like corona lights happening. This is at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's a different type of vibe too, and they can see the crowd, they're seeing everyone dancing, having fun. you know some people are probably just coming out of their hungover shell because the the Ripper that was $12.30.99. Go
I
and
think
listen to
that
that.
show and the first set of 1231 definitely get overlooked because of obviously, the all night
Dude,
set. They
I
are
I listened
fantastic.
to your podcast with Greg Knight, my man, my right hand man. He's one of my best friends. But you mentioned that one of the songs that you're chasing is Mike's song, and that is above and beyond the best Mike song out there. Have you ever seen the video online for that Mike
I know it
song?
exists. I haven't
It
watched it.
exists. You have to go watch it. Kuroda unloads every ounce of haze that he has on stage. And there was just this massive cloud of fog that went literally from like the stage past like the front of house section. And
That's awesome.
it was so amazing. But yeah, that's just getting back to the split open and melt, like remembering that like what we're talking about here is the daytime, and certainly the atmosphere and the vibe of what's going on around the band is going to influence what's happening in the way that they're playing, so getting back to it, they're doing that bossa nova thing for a while and coming full circle where we started at about 1850, which is where I think on re-listen it cuts off at Split It Open and Melt, and it goes into, it's marked labeled as Catapult.
Catapult, yeah.
It goes into Fishman just like hits the closed hi-hat. It's kind of like still got this underlying like bossa nova. It's like if you played like first tube drum beat in a bossa nova style or something like that. That
Interesting.
like kind of quick thing. And Mike is doing like just a super funky like bass line, and he's got this cool little bend in the middle of the line that I really honestly have never heard anything like it in a jam out of him. And Trey just immediately follows it, and everyone follows it, and it's kind of, they're doing this jam over what's coming out of this kind of, I don't know exactly what notes it is. It's like an AG kind of thing, or like a DC, kind of back and forth, like major chords going back and forth, and it just drops into this thing. And then they sing Catapult over it, and it's just goosebumps and dancey vibes and like epicness. It's just truly amazing. They come out of that jam, and they'd never finish Split Open and Melt. It just kind of fizzles out and fades out, and then the crowd goes crazy and cheers for a few seconds, and then after about a minute of the crowd going crazy, Trey comes up to the mic and says, only at the largest concert in the world can you get away with playing a song like that, and that was just really, that said it all,
That's awesome.
for that moment, and really, that weekend.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that must have been so incredible. Yeah, I honestly, I wish I could have had the opportunity to be at an event like Big Cypress. Just so cool.
You will.
One of my
There will be moments.
one of my family members was there, and she's not even into Fish. I think she went because a couple of her friends were going, and I'm supremely jealous.
Yeah, I took friends of mine that were not into Fish at all, and still are not into Fish. Don't go to shows, but still consider that one of the best times of their life, for sure.
I can't imagine there being any better way to spend a New Year's Eve, let alone the dawn of the new millennium.
Yeah, it was great. I think it really taught me to kind of like live in the moment, for sure, and just enjoy what's around me. And that's what I think of when I go see Fish. I know that's what Trey preaches a lot of, rightfully so. Be here now, be in the moment, like be the light, kind of. I think he's been very influenced by Eckhart Tolle or something, over the years because of his life experience. But it's certainly the life I live as well, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And I cannot wait to see this damn band play live again
Yeah.
sometime in 2021. I'm putting money on it.
I hope so. Next fall is my current dream. It's unfortunate, but I'm just hoping that this time next year I will have seen Goose and Fish.
I'm assuming you've never seen Goose.
I have not, and if I had been into them last November, I would have gone to see them in like Buffalo, and I'm kicking myself that I wasn't. Like I
You're
knew
talking
of
about
the
the
band.
Buffalo, no, the November 16th
Yeah,
Buffalo show,
and that would have been
2019.
like my birthday week too.
Oh,
But yeah, I knew of
that
the
was a
band
good
at the
one.
time, and I had heard a little bit of them, but I hadn't really been like, "Oh my god, this band is awesome!" And that kind of hit me in like February, which was fantastic timing.
Yeah,
Um,
that
yeah,
Buffalo, Buffalo is just like a really good town for a lot of bands. I followed Humphreys McGee for a long, long time, and some of their best shows were in Buffalo. Like Buffalo, I was there for that Goose show last year, and it was the vibe was good. It was dialed in. The band was feeling it. I mean,
yeah,
not to mention, Nietzsche's is a very, very small place. And it was just packed to the gills. Probably one of the most packed shows I've ever seen for Goose, regardless of venue size. Just the ratio of people to space.
hmm
There was no space, all people, but it was definitely, one of the highlights of the year for sure. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so,
I need to. Umphreys is on the list for bands I need to see as well. I've got so it's a long list now. But yeah, I'm hoping I'm hoping that the Fish original were supposed to be fall tour rumors for this year are the same next year because there was rumors of either Buffalo, Rochester, or both, or two nights in one of them
okay, yeah,
for
that
a Fish fall tour, and I would love that.
I have a theory and a hope as a Fish fan, and this in no way, shape, or form is official news as a representative, like being in the industry or anything. I do not know
Mm-hmm.
anything about Fish's tour, but my hope as a Fish fan is that they will start at Dick's, and maybe like Dick's, instead of being the end of summer tour, will be like a beginning of a fall tour, you know.
Mm.
And I think that could be good timing, even if they don't like play the next weekend. Maybe they play Dick's, they just fire it up like they do for 3 nights, and then they come back like 3 or 4 weeks later and start playing shows, and maybe they play for like a month, through Halloween. I think Halloween's on
Yeah,
a Sunday next year, so they ended on a Sunday night barn burner Halloween show, and then come back a couple of months later and play MSG.
yeah. I'm
Who
I'm
knows?
hoping we do get a more extensive touring schedule next year. I think you know
I could
the
see
only
that happening.
obstacle in the way of that would be the usual Mike and Paige don't want to be away from their families for that long.
Yeah, but
But
I
I
could see
know,
the band like wanting to play because
oh, absolutely.
they understand when they're able to play. These bands understand how much of a healing component they're going to play in people's lives,
And for
in our
themselves, and
community.
you can
A
really
hundred
see.
percent, 100%.
I think more now than ever in the last few years, you can really see how much fun the four of them have on stage together. Um, it wasn't always that apparent. And I know when I watch videos of them like from 1.0 and 2.0, it's not as apparent. Um, but I think the last 4 or 5 years, you can really see like not just Trey is smiling anymore. They're all just so filled with joy when they're playing music together, and I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely something that I look forward to. I feel extremely fortunate that in the midst of this ruthless year that we're having in the music industry, I've watched so many of my friends who own venues lose their venue. People who work for
Mm-hmm.
venues and bands and stuff, they lose their job. They're driving a truck now. They're selling houses now. They they just could not sustain themselves. But I
Right.
feel extremely fortunate that uh, there were ways for that allowed musicians to play music, like the drive-in scenarios, the socially distant pod scenarios, and therefore Goose was able to play, and the fact that the guys decided that they felt safe enough to get out there and go play is
Yeah,
just
and those were
great.
some
I mean,
phenomenal shows.
yeah, I mean it starts with the promoters, making sure that the the bands are in a safe environment, and our agents and a gentleman that I co-manage the band with, just filtering out everything, making sure that the guys are in a safe space, and not just the guys but our crew, because this is not just the people on stage, the crew that gets there at 8 in the morning and leaves at 2 in the morning,
Right.
like they are the guys that make this shit happen. The band can play fucking awesome music. I mean, the band loads their own gear as well, um, from time to time. But props to not only our crew, but the crews of all the venues and all the bands that were able to get out there and at least try to make something happen this year. It's just been such a crazy year, and I really hope for the best for everyone in our industry next year for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great place to wrap up the episode. I'd like to say thank you so much, Matt, for coming on. It's been awesome talking fish and split open and melt with you today. Yeah, I'm hoping we can meet at either a fish or goose show in the future.
Yeah, we'll do both. I really appreciate you having me on. Keep
Of
doing
course.
it. I really love this format. It's a really cool exercise. I'd also like to remind people to get out and vote if you live in Georgia and you're listening to this
Yes.
podcast.
Yes. And also, thank you to Greg Knight for connecting the two of us.
Love you, Greg.
Much appreciated. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. Hope you have a fantastic day, and we will see you next time.